All right, guys. So it turns out that breakfast may indeed be the most important meal of the day. So, welcome back to my channel. If you don't know me, my name is Marco. I'm a clinical nutritionist, integrative health practitioner, and a jiu-jitsu black belt. And today I want to talk to you about why I stopped skipping breakfast and stopped intermittent fasting. Now, if you're here and you're watching this, likely you have heard about intermittent fasting, and perhaps you maybe even tried it yourself. For the longest time, it seemed that everybody was on the bandwagon. We had every health influencer that you followed, every YouTube channel, your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, almost everybody intermittent fasting. Now, some people did it in a very structured way where there was certain periods of time or 2 days every now and again where they would stop eating to give their digestive system a break and in a way to restrict their calories. And they felt quite a lot of benefits from it. And this was me included. For a period of time there, I really struggled with my gut health. I had chronic IBS, and not eating was much easier than actually eating. I also wanted to lose a little bit of weight, and so I didn't want to count my calories. It was a little bit too time consuming to sit there and measure my food. And so I thought, well, if I just skip breakfast, I'm automatically cutting out 300 to 400 calories, and that should help me kind of lose a little bit of weight. And it does, and it works, and it's a valid way to control your calories. However, I have recently reintroduced breakfast. I've felt a heck of a lot better, and I want to talk to you about those benefits today. And I also want to talk to you about some of the studies that I've been looking at and my experience in our clinic. For those of you that don't know, I run an online integrative health clinic called Humanly Wellness. We help people with autoimmune conditions and chronic health conditions remotely online, and we do quite a lot of functional testing and blood testing. And what I've noticed in our patients is that many of them, particularly female patients, tend to actually undereat and are undernourished as opposed to overeat. And so what happens is many people that come to us simply skip breakfast. This is not intermittent fasting. This is just skipping a meal. And so what happens is they wake up in the morning, they have just gone through a fasted state, right? So they've slept for 8 hours, sometimes, as little as 6 hours or a little bit more. And they've gone through this period of being fasted. They have no energy, no calories coming in, no glucose, no protein, no fats. And they wake up in the morning and they have a coffee. Coffee, me included. This was me for a while. I would have black coffee and water, and I would skip breakfast and then not eat until around 12 o'clock, sometimes even 1 o'clock. And this makes it particularly difficult for you to actually hit your goals in terms of what your body needs for nourishment. Simply, if you don't have enough energy coming in, particularly in the form of protein, you won't have enough energy coming out, and it's very difficult to heal. There's been a few studies on this, but one of the most recent one was done in the University of Sydney here in Australia, and it talked about protein malnourishment or what we call protein starvation. And it showed that people who had a protein-rich meal in the first hour of the day, it's less calories overall throughout the rest of the day. So it seemed to balance out their sugar levels, and they had less want and desire and cravings for ultra processed foods. Another reason why you might want to consider eating breakfast again, turns out it might actually be the most important meal of the day, is that throughout the day, we have a circadian rhythm. So our body changes, it's fluid, it's not always in the same state in terms of hormones. And insulin, which helps us use the energy that we consume, we are more insulin sensitive, and insulin is more effective earlier in the day, and it tends to drop off as the day goes on. So earlier in the day, you are much more insulin sensitive than you are later in the day and at night. And so if you have a protein rich, carbohydrate rich, and fat rich meal first thing in the day, you actually make better use of those nutrients as opposed to having that meal later at night. You're much more insulin resistant at night. And so what happens is you don't transport those glucose molecules as effectively to where they need to go. You have higher blood glucose levels, and perhaps you kind of experience this pre-diabetes type of symptoms. But what I found was with me and many of our patients, you've got to think, okay, can I fit in all of my nutrient needs within a 4 or 6 hour window? And most people, unless they're very well organized, aren't going to be able to do that. And so what happens, a scenario that often happens with our patients, they wake up in the morning, they're already undernourished. they already don't consume enough protein to meet their requirements. They're already somewhat living in a deficit. Many of our female patients, when we actually look at their dietary recall, they eat very little. They don't eat very much food. Their protein intake is quite low, their overall calorie intake is quite low, and they find themselves craving quite a lot of sweet foods and hypercaloric foods because they're starving, right? And their brain is kind of starving for glucose, starving for calories. So what I found to be more effective is actually loading up on protein, carbohydrates, and fats, having a really rich, complex meal first thing in the morning within 30 to 60 minutes of waking up. It's actually also quite good for your nervous system. It gives you fuel because if you don't have any fuel coming in, your brain has to somehow find and create that fuel from somewhere else. Now, that can be from stored glycogen from the liver. It can be stored glycogen from muscle. It can be breaking down amino acids. So literally breaking down your muscle tissue to make amino acids available so that you can meet the demands of your day. So if you are like me, and let's say you wake up 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning, and you have a busy day ahead of you. You've got emails to answer. You're going to go do a gym workout. You've got your kids to take care of and take to school. You are already in a state where your brain and your body requires energy. And if you don't have enough energy coming in through food, because that's the only way we can get energy, your brain will have to create it somehow. And it will create it by breaking down muscle tissue or liberating glucose and stored what we call glycogen into the bloodstream. It does that by increasing stress hormones. Okay, so things like cortisol or epinephrine and adrenaline, and you end up in a more catabolic or tissue breakdown state. And so fasting, even though it has its benefits, it is not for everybody, and most of the time people don't do it correctly. So instead of skipping breakfast, where it's crucial that you have that energy coming in, what I've started to do for myself is I've actually either started to skip dinner, completely skip it. So not eating after 5 o'clock or 6 p.m. Or if I'm doing a workout or if I'm teaching a jiu-jitsu class or doing something quite physical later in the day, I'll have a dinner, but I'll have a quite small dinner, like something just a little bit of carbohydrates and a little bit of protein just to fill in those gaps. But majority of my calories in my intake now happens throughout the day. So I wake up in the morning and I'll have typically an egg omelet with some avocado, some fruit, something like that. I'll have my water, I'll have my coffee, I'll take my supplements. And that happens around 7, 7:30. And then around 12 to 1 o'clock, I'll have a pretty hearty lunch. And again, I try to get between 30 to 50 grams of protein with each meal. And then around 3 to 4 p.m., I'll have a snack, which usually is either a protein smoothie or something really quick that's light. At that point, I usually will go train. I come back for dinner and I'll have a very small meal. And I still end up, having a period of about 10 to 12 hours where I don't have anything coming in. I'm not eating anything. So I'm giving my digestive system a break. So I'm still technically fasting for 10 to 12 hours, but I'm making sure that I'm meeting my protein requirements. Now, for a general person, the recommended daily intake for protein is 1.8 grams per kilo of body weight. Anywhere between 1.6 to 1.8 grams is around the intake that we want. So if you are a 60-kilogram female, you want to be having around, let's say, 90 to 120 grams of protein per day. This is just for maintenance. Those protein requirements will go up if you are, say, pregnant, if you are quite physically active, if you have some type of tissue injury or surgery or something that requires healing. So you want those extra resources, and it's going to be very difficult to hit those protein requirements if you are eating 1 to 2 meals per day, or if you are trying to fit all of your nourishment or nutrient needs within a 4 to 8 hour period of eating. So I've found with many of our patients and with myself that they feel a heck of a lot better when they actually reintroduce breakfast into their diet. And I don't mean breakfast like breakfast cereals or high carbohydrate meals. What I mean is having 30 to 40 grams, like a good hearty breakfast, seems to set them up for a better day. What I found for myself as well, anecdotally, is that I actually don't have an afternoon energy crash anymore. I used to struggle quite a bit around 3 to 4 o'clock. So I would wake up, I'd fast, And then I would have, I'd be starving. By the time lunchtime came around, I'm starving. I want food. And I would have this big meal, probably a bit too big of a meal, and then get back to work. But I found around 2 or 3 o'clock, like I couldn't think. I had so much brain fog. I was probably putting quite a lot of digestive demand on my system because I'm having this big meal and I'm not as clear and effective in my thinking. So it was much better for me to spread out those calories in a couple of meals and allow my digestive system to do its work in a shorter period of time. And I don't have that energy crash in the afternoon. So instead of having this kind of up and down with my blood sugar levels, I actually am a lot more stable. And of course, having better insulin sensitivity throughout the days means that I can actually make better use of those nutrients. I can put them to work. I can transport them to my muscle tissue. I can put it in my liver glycogen. I can actually use those nutrients that I'm eating as opposed to having them at night. Now it's funny because in the health world, it seems that things tend to go in full circle. There was a period of time where everyone thought breakfast is the most important meal of the day, right? We used to say it all the time. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Do not skip breakfast. This is what you should be eating. And in the bodybuilding community for a long time, I mean, people would be afraid of that kind of missing that anabolic window, right? What if I don't get my protein intake at breakfast? What if I don't get my protein intake right after a workout? How am I going to grow and repair and grow muscle? And it turns out that these things that we were thinking were kind of on the money. They were correct. But then what happened was there was a period of time where intermittent fasting got very popular, and now breakfast isn't the most important meal of the day. Right now, it was, well, you can just eat one meal or two meals and get your nourishment, but that's not true for everybody. If you are somebody who is, let's say, a little bit overweight, you're insulin resistant, you're pre-diabetic, you're overweight, you have sleep apnea, right? And you have weight to lose, then perhaps fasting might be a good thing, but probably not skipping breakfast. Okay. I would recommend actually, and what I've started to do for my, like, again, I would recommend skipping dinner instead of skipping your morning meal. So even if you're somebody who's overweight and you want to lose a couple of pounds, and many people now do because new year, new me, everyone's got weight loss goals. Instead of skipping your breakfast, try instead having 30 to 50 grams of protein first meal of the day. And that can look, I mean, you can do it however you want. We've got to change our idea of what these breakfast foods are. So when we think of breakfast, many people think of eggs, cereal, it has to be a breakfast food, but it doesn't have to be. It can be steak. Steak and eggs is a very good breakfast to have first thing in the morning. And what you'll find is that you'll feel a lot more satiated throughout the day. And you won't have those cravings that you normally have for sweets and carbs and hypercaloric foods. So instead of skipping breakfast, I recommend actually eating a hearty breakfast, eating a good lunch, eating a snack, having majority of your calorie intake throughout the day, and later in the day, having lighter meals or maybe cutting them out altogether. And what you'll find also is that you sleep better. So avoiding food for about 2 to 3 hours before going to bed is actually quite beneficial. You give your digestive system an opportunity to actually process what you've eaten so that you can have a better night's sleep and your digestion isn't also working while you're sleeping. So this has been a huge change for me. And as with all things in nutrition, the information is always updated, and it's important to take each case individually and not apply everything to everyone. And so when you're thinking about intermittent fasting, just consider, right? Let's say you're anything like me, or let's say you're a young parent and you have a couple of kids, you have a demanding job, and you also want to get some exercise in for the day. You've got to consider that likely you need a decent amount of calories just to keep up with your natural demands. And if you undereat, what will happen is your body will have to readjust. Your brain will have to find that energy from somewhere. So you will end up feeling over time fatigued. You will end up, perhaps developing some type of thyroid issue or imbalance because your thyroid is having a difficult time regulating your metabolism without having enough nutrients coming in. You'll end up experiencing maybe more soft tissue injuries because of lack of protein synthesis. You're not building muscle. You're actually breaking down muscle. You're catabolizing, right? So it's very important. Let's say you are a 80 kilogram male who's exercising 4 or 5 times a week. likely you'll need anywhere between 2,500 to 3,200 calories around there just to maintain muscle mass or build a little bit of muscle mass. Now, if your goal is to lose weight, then maybe you end up in a slight calorie deficit. But even then, you should never really be eating at an 80 as an 80 kilogram male anything less than 2,500 calories. Now, just to give you an idea, trying to get, say, 2,800 calories of intake and 150 grams of protein of intake in one meal or even two meals is extremely difficult and extremely demanding for your digestive system. And so spreading those calories out throughout the day is a better strategy. Not to mention that a lot of the benefits, not all the benefits, but a lot of the benefits of intermittent fasting simply come from just having a slight calorie deficit. So most people are doing intermittent fasting to lose weight. You can also lose weight just by having a slight calorie deficit. How do you achieve that? Well, the research says that if you have a rich breakfast, like rich in protein breakfast, you will overall throughout the day eat less calories. So skipping breakfast might actually set you up to fail. It might be that your blood sugar levels are dysregulated. You find it difficult to control your appetite. You're a lot more stressed, and most people when they wake up, they have some form of stimulant, caffeine, usually a coffee. And so you're setting yourself up for this very high stress environment, and then food tends to come later. And at that point, guys, I always say, like, if you starve yourself and you don't, control your blood sugar levels, and then there's food available and you're starving, you'll eat it, right? So we have an appetite, we have primal wants and needs. And if you set yourself up for failure, you will fail. There is no amount of discipline that will stop you having a quote unquote bad meal if you are starving. So you don't want to do that. You never want to allow yourself to get to the point where you're starving. You never really want to allow yourself to get to a point where having a cheat meal is not even an option for you. To you want to control that, right? You want to make sure that you set yourself up to win. Think about it. If you were in a desert and you were extremely thirsty and there was water, even if there was just Coca-Cola available, you would drink it because you're extremely thirsty. You need fluids. It's the same thing with food. So yes, fasting can be helpful in some ways and for some people, but as a long-term strategy, I think it shouldn't be implemented every day. And I don't think that you should be skipping breakfast every day. I certainly don't do it anymore. And when I do it, I do feel a lot worse, to be honest. My energy levels aren't as good. I'm a little bit more jittery. I'm actually a little bit more agitated. And by the time midday and lunchtime comes around, I'm starving. And so what I've done is I've set myself up to fail. I have a much more difficult time not overeating or overindulging in the meals that I have. If you're struggling with a chronic condition, if you're an athlete, if you're a mum, if you're pregnant, if you've just had a baby, it's really important that you get enough nourishment in. You are a human being, you have needs, you have nutritional needs that need to be met. So, having enough protein, having enough carbohydrates, having enough salt and water and electrolytes and minerals coming in is very, very, very important. If you don't provide that to your body, your brain will adjust and it will find a way to survive, but you might not feel so good with the way that it adjusts. So, malnourishment seems to be a pretty big problem in our clinic. It seems to be a pretty big problem, particularly in female patients. And, a way to think about it is if you were an Olympic sprinter and you were preparing for, the Olympic final 100-meter race, you would not be fasting. That wouldn't be the smart thing to do, would it? If you wanted to perform optimally, you would not be fasting. You see all these athletes and particularly fighters and UFC fighters, which is mostly what I tend to follow. Yes, they fast, but they don't fast when they are in competition and when they are in training camp. When these guys and gals are training for a world championship fight and they're training 2 to 3 times per day and they're cutting weight and they're preparing, you best believe they're not skipping meals. In fact, they're making sure that they get their exact energy requirements with each meal because that's how you perform at your best. So why would you do any different yourself? If you're running a business or you're a CEO or you work at a high pressure job, even if you're just your average Joe trying to raise your family, you have energy requirements. Treat yourself like an athlete. Make sure you are nourished. Make sure you have everything you possibly could need to to function optimally, right? Another example that I used with a patient recently is I said, if you have a toddler or a newborn, you feed them at the same time every single day. When they skip a meal, when you forget to feed them, or for whatever reason you can't, what happens to that newborn or to that baby? They become irritable. They start crying. They're cranky. They no longer feel good because their body requires this rhythm and requires these nutrients coming in. It's the same thing with you. Treat yourself. Your body loves consistency. If you wake up every day and have a good breakfast and a lunch and a snack, and you do this at the same time every single day, you develop this rhythm, right? Our body it functions on a circadian rhythm. Our entire world functions on a circadian rhythm. We have a sunset, a sunrise. And it's the same thing for you. So if you find yourself skipping meals, you best believe that you're not going to feel so good. Now, that doesn't mean that you should overconsume calories. That doesn't mean that you should be eating in excess. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying that you shouldn't be skipping your meals, particularly if you struggle with things like chronic fatigue, autoimmune, thyroid issues, a gut health disorder, right? You need nutrients coming in to help support the healing process. The main way that we have nutrients coming in is food. Food is our primary way, excuse me, of getting enough energy and nutrient requirements. And then supplements are a secondary way. As the name suggests, they are supplementary. You shouldn't be relying on them to get all of your nourishment, right? So very, very important, guys, unless you have unless you're really struggling with metabolic disease and you have diabetes and you're overweight and you're trying to, lose quite a lot of weight in a short period of time, I wouldn't recommend eating in you know, a very drastic calorie deficit. And most people do. You'd be surprised. What I urge you to do is to download something like MyFitnessPal or a calorie tracking app, and just for a few days, maybe just for 3 to 4 days, add up all of the food that you eat and see how many calories do you have per day? How much protein are you eating per day? Are you meeting the requirement of 1.6 to 1.8 grams of protein per kilo of body weight? Are you eating enough fats? Are you eating enough carbohydrates? Do you get enough potassium? Do you get enough salt? Are you hydrating appropriately? These are the basics to cover. And if you are not doing this on a consistent basis, you will not feel so good. You will feel tired and you will not understand why you feel tired. And what happens is most people look for a supplement. So they feel fatigued, they feel lightheaded, they have brain fog, and they go, oh, it must be, this supplement will help me or that supplement will help me. But actually, what it is they're just not getting enough of the fundamental nutrients that they need. So this is why I have stopped skipping breakfast, because I have found it extremely difficult to get my nutritional requirements in by limiting the hours that I'm able to eat. And I've found it much better for me anyway to skip dinner instead. So I sleep better. I wake up feeling better. I actually wake up with an appetite. Most people say to me, but I'm not, Marco, I'm not hungry at breakfast. Of course, you're not hungry at breakfast. You've been eating till 11 p.m. at night. And you wake up in the morning and you still haven't even digest the food that you've had from the night before, and you're not hungry in the morning because that's not the rhythm that you've trained your body to operate on. So for those people, if you don't wake up with an appetite, what I recommend doing is finishing your last meal earlier in the evening, maybe 8 p.m. and then push it back to 6, 8, 7:30 and then 7, and start to have small snacks in the morning. You might even start with like one boiled egg or a protein shake with a handful of nuts or something super small and simple. And what will happen is you'll start to change the circadian rhythm of your body and you'll start to wake up with an appetite, which means the furnace is going, your metabolism's on, you're ready to expand and to put out energy. So remember, guys, if there's no energy coming out, there will be no energy. Sorry, if there's no energy coming in, rather, there will be no energy coming out. How can you expect to have energy if you are not consuming nutrients, calories, protein, carbohydrates, and fats? It's very, very simple. If you want to keep muscle, if you're somebody who's at the gym and you're pumping weights and you want to keep this muscle mass, it requires sufficient amounts of energy and protein. If you don't have enough of it, your body has to find it somehow. And so it will break down muscle tissue, okay, to provide those amino acids into the bloodstream. So, guys, really, really important. If you have any questions about intermittent fasting, drop them in the comments below. Let me know. I will go ahead and answer any questions you have. If you want to chat to me directly, there will be a link somewhere, a form that you can fill out, and you can book a free appointment and we can see if we can help you. But yes, please reconsider breakfast. It is indeed one of the more important meals of the day. And for some of you, it will set you up to win instead of set you up to fail. Over and out.